Well, good morning, everybody. I hope that and perhaps we've had some new people join our electronic congregation during this time. I've been posting in various sites. If you don't know who I am, I'm John Bain. I'm the pastor of the Walnut Grove Baptist Church, and we're broadcasting live here. Helping me is Andy Crow, and he's our usual media and sound director here at the church, making things happen with our electronics anyway on any given Sunday. Danny Bain is our minister of music, and he's been helping us the last several weeks, and so I appreciate their help and making it possible. I know that everybody in our church doesn't have access to internet or to any kind of live broadcast like this, but we're happy and glad to do this. We're reaching out to people that we can, and we've been mailing letters, we've been making telephone calls and sending texts and other ways of shouting out and reaching out to the others that we're trying to stay knit together. I was thinking of, it's almost humorous in a way, and the Lord, I'm sure, appreciates this as well, that preachers, we're really gung-ho, and it's really part, and we feel like there's a valid scriptural foundation for telling people, you need to be in church. You know, we know that you love the Lord. God is everywhere. You can be as close to God out on the creek bank as you can at church. That's all true. And if you go to church, it doesn't mean you're going to heaven. All of that is true. But so but you can't be a member of the flock unless you're in the fold. The Lord is your shepherd. Well, that has all of those kind of references is about being congregating, gathering. Jesus said, when two or more of you are gathered together. And so Jesus was saying, get together. The Bible says, don't forsake assembling. And so we make a strong point, I believe, about we need each other. And fellowship with each other is important. I need you. We need each other. And during a time like this, we miss each other. And we miss congregating. We miss being able to get together. But now I'm beginning to think of sermons and lessons about, and so today's message is kind of about how, we need to learn how to stand alone. And if we ever get into a situation where it's just me and God, I need to be all right with that. I need to be able to not only survive on that, but I need to thrive. It's not either this or that. We all need to be able to be stranded on a desert island somewhere and just be completely close to God, fulfilled in our spiritual life, and not be afraid, and to be growing, and to be everything that God wants us to be. Well, but we do need each other too. So it's all that. So maybe we were maybe I was a little bit on balance. I like for people to come and be at church. I like to see people. I think it's important for them to be close. And when we miss that, when we don't have that, we do miss it. But during this time, it's an excellent time for God to say to us, hey, I'm still here, never left you. You've never been alone. Well, just a few notes. Wednesday is Randy Wentz's birthday. I'm a little bit older than he is, so he's going to be 64 on Wednesday. Now, Randy doesn't have the internet. He did, and he doesn't anymore. But that's a story for all of us, or any of us at any given time. But on the 29th, if you can call him, if you need his number, I'm sure he would mind you reaching out to me and call and sing happy birthday to him. We're not going to sing to him this morning, but that's Wednesday. Got some wonderful pictures from Danny Ward this weekend. Wes and his family were down to bring Leona, their new addition to their family, to visit down here in North Alabama. And they got to spend some time with James. And Danny sent us some wonderful pictures of James and the baby. And he calls her Little Cricket. I've never seen James smile quite that brightly. If you haven't seen those pictures, they're on my Facebook page, or I can send them to you. So thanks to Danny Ward. Danny and Terry Ward are our church financial directors and leaders. Terry is our primary bookkeeper. She's been paying our bills and our salaries and keeping up with our ministerial obligations. And she left us a financial report this morning I gave one to Andy to take to Henry. Danny Bain has his today. I'm going to mail one out to Alan and to Ronnie, Alan Dotson and Ronnie Reeves, our other two deacons. And just thank the Lord for your generosity and for your continued faithfulness. We're doing okay, and things are getting paid and done. And so thank you so much. Some of you bring your checks by and leave them here in findable places. Mail your offerings to the church. And some of you have been making contributions through our Kindred online giving. Thanks to all of you for that. I want to express my appreciation to all of you that I've tagged for sending out one-call messages. We got one at 10 o'clock this morning from Henry and Linda Crow. I appreciate their sending out their message. So several of you have already sent me your messages, and they have been aired. I just knew that I wanted everybody to get a one-call message, at least one or two a day during this strange time. That may be a little overkill, but I knew also with a great definiteness that going to get tired of hearing me preach, or getting tired of hearing me give announcements or run over the same thing on one calls. So got a call last night about 6 o'clock from Jason Reynolds. I reached out to Jason, and he said he would be glad to send a message. So you'll be getting a message, I think, sometime tonight from Donald Trump. So you just kind of wait for that. Some of you may not want a call from President Trump. Actually, I think tonight, let me see, it's hard for me to keep, I've got one tonight and one tomorrow morning and tomorrow night that are scheduled. I'm just going to leave that for your curiosity, but thank you so much for responding to that, and especially to Jason for his very kind call. Well, I've got the old Rubik's Cube right here. I don't know if you've ever played with this, or if it's ever been a part of a puzzle that you've cared anything about. And I've got a magic box here that is empty. And the Rubik's Cube is a unique puzzle that has 6 different sides. It has 6 different colors that make up the cube, and you can spin all of the pieces and parts: the top, the bottom, the middle, the ends, and they all spin around so that you can really confuse the block, just like this one right here. And I think we're living in some times right now where we don't realize that we've been given a puzzle, a test. It's very important, I think. It's a part of my life. When I see difficulties and I face challenges, and when I see hurdles before me, I always think in my mind, all right, this is a test. God's testing me. I have an opportunity here to show what I'm made of, or that to prove that I'm a Christian, or to be used of God. Problems and troubles are always opportunities. If you do not have a faith and a philosophy that incorporates that point of view, I encourage you to look into it. I recommend it. This is a test. How am I going to put this together? And it may look like a great confusion. Doesn't that look like just a mess to you? Well, I'm going to put that right here inside the box. And this side over here is empty. I'm just going to put that little door right there. God is always bringing order out of chaos. God is always fixing things. He's putting things together. No, he doesn't. Even when Jesus came, he didn't come. He didn't heal everyone in the world who was sick. He didn't raise everyone from the dead who had died. But he put in motion a plan so that ultimately, as things go along, he's always doing something. He's always doing something, and he's always working. Now, and I see here that as I've loaded this, I have loaded the wrong cube in here. This cube is not the magic one that straightens itself out. This is still confused. So I'm going to have to bring this back next Sunday to show you that God is still working. It doesn't always work when I want it to, and God doesn't always do what I want him to do. But this cube is still, I'm going to have to look at that. And sometimes I pray, and sometimes I I always try to trust God, but then I open the box and I look into it and I say, well, that needs to cook a little while longer. I need to trust God a little bit longer. Sometimes lamb services work just exactly like that, or shall I say, it don't work. But I've tried to never be nonplussed. I should have just been a little bit more awake this morning when I was, instead of just pulling this off the magical shelf and bringing it with me this morning. So that will be a redo, or I'll trust the Lord until next Sunday to be able to demonstrate that. Well, I'm glad Danny has a song for us again this morning. So I'm going to slide the screen over to him. And I believe perhaps his song will work better than my magic trick this morning. Danny, you share with us before the message.
In these times of trials, we tend to sometimes think that everything's out of control, but trust me when I say that this did not take God by surprise. He understands, He knows, and He is watching, and He's with you, and even though you may feel alone, you are not alone. And this scripture is an old song that everybody would be familiar with, and it kind of comes from, this song comes from a scripture in Matthew chapter 10, verse 29. It says, "Aren't two sparrows sold for a penny, yet not one of them falls to the ground without your Father's consent. But even the hairs of your head have been counted. So don't be afraid. You're worth more than many sparrows." Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart be lonely, longing for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is He. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. Let not your heart be troubled. His tender words I hear, and resting on His goodness, I lose all my doubts and fears. Though by the path He leadeth, but one step I may see. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me.
Thank you, Danny. I'll be looking in the scriptures this morning from the Gospel of Matthew for just a few minutes. The Gospel of Matthew in chapter 4. I think perhaps that there might be many who if you ask them, how many times was Jesus tempted during his earthly or public ministry? And I think if it were Jeopardy, they might, of course, have to answer it in the form of a question by saying maybe 3 times. And that there is, of course, and that's what I want to speak to you about. There was a time in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 4, the first few verses, and also Luke's Gospel, chapter 4, that the time when Jesus was led out into the wilderness and was to be tempted of the devil. But believe me, Jesus was tempted every day of his life. We can see evidences where the scribes and the Pharisees tempted him. And there are times, the devil is not the only one who tempts us. As a matter of fact, James says that we're all tempted from the inside. When we look at something and we have our own personal desires, our own personal ideas about something, he says that's where temptation actually literally comes from. It doesn't come from outside and attack us. It comes from inside, and we either respond to it or succumb to it, or we do not. So Jesus was tempted by Pilate. He was tempted by his disciples. He was tempted by his family members. There were always occasions for Jesus to disobey or misbehave or to get off program or to disobey God. So Jesus was tempted often. And then the question, I know we discussed it as a theological problem, since Jesus was God, could he actually really be tempted? And was his temptation genuine? Of course, in his divine nature, he always thwarted. He never succumbed to temptation, but it was always very real. It was always very real. So I've never been fond of the notion that Jesus could never actually, theologically, be tempted. He was in all points tempted. And the scriptures say, just like us, yet without sin. Well, let's pause for just a moment of prayer. I want to pray for you. I do pray for you often and always. But let me pause for just a moment of prayer before I make the point I'd like to make this morning that I feel that God wants me to share. Father, thank you for the privilege of reaching out through this means. And yet I pray for all the members of our church and our friends and family members who do not see this morning or cannot reach out to the people that they know and love in the same way. Help us to find ways creatively to make sure that the people we know and care for have everything that they need and everything that meets their daily requirements. Show us what to do, how to minister, how to be during this time. Thank you for your blessings upon us, upon our church. Teach us what it means to be together and how to stand alone. For we ask all this in your name. Amen. Here in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 4, and verse 1, it says, and this is at a time when Jesus, in the story of the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew is telling the story about, this is the story of Jesus. He starts with Jesus' family genealogy, his family tree, his family records, who Jesus was related to and how he came to this earth, and then how he was born, and how Mary and Joseph played a part in being used of God to bring about God's salvation through Jesus' birth. Matthew has one of the most precious tellings of the birth of Jesus. And remember, I shared with you, I believe last Sunday, that the disciples of Jesus probably never heard the story of Jesus' birth or about the Bethlehem or about the shepherds or the wise men or the manger. They probably never heard any of that until maybe later on in their life and ministry. When they met Jesus, he was 30 years of age, and there's no evidence that he ever, there's no record of him sitting down and said, let me tell you about how I was born. I believe that later on Matthew and perhaps even Luke interviewed Mary, his mother, and that's where they got that part of the story for the Gospels. But here in chapter 4, Jesus is about to begin his public ministry. He's about to present himself and to make himself known and to start sharing about his mission and about what God was doing and why he had come. But before that could happen, this is very important. As I said, Jesus was often beset with wrong choices or possibilities, and he never partook of any of them. But here it says that this is when he was a familiar story where he is driven out into the wilderness for 40 days, and he is tempted of the devil himself, a direct, personal, audible temptation to do what is wrong. But I just want us to look for a moment today at the first verse in chapter 4 of Matthew's Gospel. Chapter 4, verse 1. Then was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. The diabolos, the cast out one, the devil. And so we have then 3 specific temptations that the devil lofted in Jesus' direction, while it says Jesus was hungry. He'd been fasting for 40 days, and it says that he was hungry. And so Jesus was in a physically weak condition. He was alone. He didn't have any support. There was no family members there. There were no friends to rally around him or for him to lean upon. He was alone, and so he was going to have to face this diabolical attack by himself. One thing we learned in seminary, in the words that Matthew uses here, and also the words that Luke uses, in the oldest manuscripts we have, the words that Jesus was led up, or Luke just says led by the Spirit into the wilderness. Now, the words that are used here are words that often are translated in a more harsh and severe tone. And it literally means Jesus was driven. He was pushed. He was compelled. And I sense this in my life sometimes. I know that the Spirit of God has the ability not only to lead me and to guide me and to show me and to point the way, but he has the ability to reach out and grab me by the lapel or get behind me and push. He has the ability to be more than just persuasive in my life and in yours, and I count on that often. Here, Jesus, it says, that he was driven. He was forced. He was placed without, to be led is one thing that Jesus said, okay, I'll do it. But here, you and I, just like Jesus, are going to find ourselves in circumstances sometimes that we didn't choose to go into, that we didn't say yes to, that we didn't volunteer for. But here we are. We're in the middle of a situation and a circumstance that we're in the middle of. We're in a spot, and we didn't bring ourselves here. Well, I didn't ask for this. I wasn't prepared for this. I wasn't looking for it. And if God had given me a choice, I might have said no. Well, that's never the case in this situation. That's not the case in this situation. And I'm grateful that the Bible indicates that God not only has the ability to lovingly lead us, but he has the ability often to compel us. And we can look at any situation that we're in. We can look at any circumstance and say, well, we can view this as something that went off the tracks, or God was caught off guard by this, or God didn't see this coming, or this is something over which God has no control. Or we can look at this and say, you know what? This is a test. I'm being tested and tempted. I've been tempted and tried. This is an opportunity. I've been put in this on purpose. This is not, there's nothing in your life, nothing in my life that this is a matter of chance or randomness or happenstance. I've been in the Judean wilderness. I've been in the Israeli Negev. When the New Testament, or the Old Testament for that matter, speaks of the wilderness, I know that I grew up watching on Walt Disney. I watched Davy Crockett. Never heard, I think a lot of Americans had never heard of Davy Crockett until Walt Disney brought him in as a character and began to tell his story. Much of it was fictional, but that we didn't care. And that one, the story that, the song about Davy Crockett that was generated by the writers and composers at Walt Disney, became a #1 hit throughout the nation. It's an amazing thing. Later on, the same actor played Daniel Boone, and we went think Daniel Boone was a man, was a big man, but he didn't hit the top of the charts, I don't think. But I grew up thinking of the wilderness as being the woods, being the trees. You know what the wilderness was in Flint, don't you?
The pines.
The pines. I'm going over to the pines. Just across the street to the side of our house was a pine thicket. And, they obviously were planted because it was just hundreds of them, and they all were in straight rows, probably about 40 or 50 rows, and it stretched maybe for 100 yards. No, probably not that much, maybe 50 yards. It seemed much larger back then. All pine trees, and they were just like in a row. Someone, knowing the history of Flint, might know whose property that was and why they planted them there like that. I think nearly all of them have been cleared away now for houses as times changed and the population of Flint grew, but we called it the pines. We had to go through the pines. We rode our bikes through the pines to get to cross over the next field, which later became a park, and go past Freeman's Grocery and then across the road, Mill Street, and go through another little stand of trees. I don't think we ever named those, but then you'd pop out there at Flint Elementary, and that's the way we went to school every morning on our bikes. But we thought of the wilderness as the pines, as the woods going out into the country and the thick, almost jungle-like undergrowth. But in the land of Israel, the wilderness is a desert. It's just rocks and sand, very little wildlife at all, very little animal life, very, very, very little plant life, not much water. And Jesus was driven out into that wilderness. As we look at this, it's also important to see there is a kind of Christian faith that is really can best be described as dualism. Dualism or twoism, that here's God and here's the devil. It's almost like the battle between good and evil, between light and darkness. Here's God, and there's this great battle, and here's the devil. Well, that is not what the Bible teaches. The Bible doesn't teach that here's God and here's the devil. It's just like here's God and the devil way down here somewhere. It's not on a par with God, not in any sense equal to God, not a challenging foe to God at all. And let me tell you this, I want you to see right here that it says that Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Jesus knew this. Jesus understood this, that as the devil was tempting him, he knew the devil was evil. The devil is wicked. The devil is contrary, and he's an enemy of God. He is against God. There's no doubt about that. But Jesus also knew that God was in control of this situation. This is not a situation where the devil was attacking Jesus and God didn't have any control over it, or that God was equally opposing it. No. It says that Jesus was compelled by the Spirit of God into the wilderness. Why? To be tempted by the devil. Do you remember in the Lord's Prayer that line? It says, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation. You know, part of the Lord's Prayer is, and lead us not into temptation. Because we realize that this is something as a tension between God and us. We don't want to be tempted. And we often don't prevail when we're tempted. And Jesus was saying, there's nothing wrong with praying and asking God, God, I got enough trouble with temptation without you leading me into it. But here, Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. Surely, God would never lead us into have you ever been in surely God didn't do this. Surely God wouldn't lead me into the wilderness where there's not any water, where there's not anything to eat. Surely God wouldn't be in charge of something where there's no friends, no family, no support. Surely this is it's so hot that God says, well, I'm sorry, it's real hot. I don't have any charge over that. I don't have any control of that. No, no, we can't look at life like that. When you're out in the desert, say, well, this is God's desert. This is God's heat. This is God's sun. This is God's no water and no grass. We've got to see that dualism is not acceptable. It's not an acceptable philosophy or theology. This was something that was important in the life of Jesus, and it had to take place. It was going to be a part of Holy Scripture. Matthew was going to record it. He thought it was important, and Luke was going to report it because the Holy Spirit led him to do that. If you can imagine this, it went kind of like this. The Holy Spirit comes to the devil and says, all right, I'm going to lead Jesus out into the wilderness. And the devil says, lead him? He said, yeah, he's going to be there. Don't worry about the terminology. I'm going to make sure it happens. And you're going to be given an opportunity to go there and browbeat him a little bit and tempt him. It's really important because it's important for him to come to the right responses to your temptations. This is important in his beginning, his earthly ministry. And the devil says, all right, I got it. There was a time there at the end of Jesus' earthly days, just before the crucifixion. Jesus had been telling his disciples, said, well, I'm going to die. I'm going to be crucified. He said, yes, I'm going to rise again. They didn't hear that part either. They weren't listening very carefully. Simon Peter, one of Jesus' disciples, said, oh, no, if they come to get you, I'm going to fight for you. I'm on your side. I'm not going to let it happen. I'd rather die than let them take you. And Jesus looked at Simon Peter, and this is what he said. He said, Simon, Simon. It's got like, your mother ever used all your name or use your first name instead of just your middle name or your nickname. You're in trouble. Well, Simon Peter, every time Jesus referred to him, he had nicknamed Simon the Rock, Peter. But he looked at him and said, Simon, Simon, after Peter made that great declaration. Oh, I'll fight for you. I'll die for you. Simon, the devil has desired to have you that he may sift you as wheat. Do you know what that statement means? He said the devil came and he asked permission. Who did he ask? Well, it sounds like he asked Jesus. Satan has desired to have thee that he might sift thee as wheat. And then Jesus says, but after you've been tried, you're going to be able to help your brothers and sisters in Christ. In other words, Jesus gave the implication. I told him, okay. We know that night of Jesus' arrest, during the whole night, that over the course, that Peter was going to actually deny that he even knew Jesus 3 times. And he was going to weep bitterly because he had denied Jesus. He was sifted as wheat. You see, that's where you take the wheat and you shake it out, and it's got chaff, and it's got weeds, and it's got grass, and then you shake it. And what you're trying to do is shake out all the wheat, and so that all the dross stays behind in the basket or in the sieve. Said Satan wants to shake out all the good out of you, but he's not going to be able to do that. When he sifts you, you're going to wind up being better. You see, the whole point of sifting wheat is not to wind up with weeds and chaff and grass. The whole point of winnowing wheat is to wind up with just wheat, with all the good. And all the bad, we can feed it to the pigs, the hogs, or we can burn it in the fire. You see, Satan doesn't really understand the whole purpose of sifting or winnowing. It was rough on Simon Peter, but you see in that circumstance that Jesus clearly implies that when the devil wants to do something to us, when he wants to harm us, when he wants to attack us, he has to get permission. And sometimes God gives permission. He can't do anything without permission. Just like he did right here. Jesus was led by the Spirit of God into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Have you ever read the book of Job? The book of Job shows that this has always been a part of the way God has dealt with the devil. The book of Job starts out in chapter 1 with this heavenly meeting, this big assembly. All the sons of God all the angelic beings come to before God for a kind of a report, and all of this is told in a kind of a symbolical language. But it says that even the devil, even Satan, appeared, and God says, "Where you been, Satan?" And Satan was having to tell God, "Well, I've been going up and down upon the earth, been doing this, been doing that." Of course, we know that there were probably specifics, and God knew exactly what he'd been doing. There was no mystery there, and Satan didn't really have to report. He didn't have to fill God in or inform God. And then he said, "Have you noticed my servant Job?" And as it turns out, Satan had noticed Job, one of God's premier followers. Later on in the book of Job, Job says, "I wish you hadn't ever noticed me. I wish you hadn't ever put your eyes on me or looked down upon me and noticed that I was alive." He said, "I kind of wish I'd kind of been under your divine radar all my life. Have you noticed my servant Job?" You know, sometimes I've prayed. I says, "Lord, I don't know if I've ever been worthy of such a compliment for you to ask such a question of me, but please don't ever ask the devil, have you ever noticed John Bain?" Because I don't want to say, "Oh no, I didn't notice him. Let me pay some attention to him." No, I don't want that. But even there, Satan said, "Well, yeah, he's very faithful because you give him everything in the world. He's rich and he's got kids and he's got a wonderful wife and he's just got if you take all that away from him, well, he'll just curse you to your face." So God says, "All right, I'll take that bet." He says, you can take away everything that Job has." He told the devil that. You can take away everything that he has, but you can't touch his body, can't touch his life. You can't touch his health or his body. And the devil says, "All right, I got you." The devil goes out and wipes out. All of his children die, and all of his sheep and his goats and all of his property and all of his material wealth. The devil just, in a day, just wipes it out. He loses it all. And his wife comes to him and says, "Won't you just curse God and die? You still hold your integrity? Curse God and die." And Job said, You mean we're going to receive good things in life and we're going to receive evil things and we're going to bail out on God?" He says, "That's foolish." So in chapter 2 it says, well, the devil came back into the presence of God again, and God was gloating. God was bragging. Said, "Yeah, you took away everything," and he still holds his integrity. Job still loves me. He believes in me. He cares for me. You took away everything. And the devil said, "Skin for skin, flesh for flesh." He said, man got his health. He's got everything. You take away his health, he'll curse you to your face. You just take away his health. And so God says, all right. You can take away his health, but you can't kill him. You can't make him die. You can just make him, you can do whatever you want to as long as he doesn't die. And the devil went out and he smote Job with awful boils from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. That sounds awful. And sometimes I've read the book of Job and I says, "Lord, that sounds kind of rough. I have a hard time with the book of Job." But Job still didn't curse God. He had boils. They said he went out and sat in the ashes behind the house where they dumped out the ashes from the cooking fire. He took a piece of broken pot and he just scraped his skin where all that infection was running and oozing from his sores. But he still never decided that he was going to quit serving God or believing in God or loving God. He didn't lose his integrity. He stayed with him, and the devil was beaten. But the point of telling that story, like I said, it's a struggle, but I think a great deal of truth in reading the book of Job, that when we see ourselves in difficult times, it's not because God's forsaken us. It may in fact be because Satan himself has been given the permission to subject us to suffering or woe, great difficulties. God's doing something. He's showing how small and insignificant the devil is. It's not God and the devil. The devil is nothing. The devil has to ask permission for everything he does. He has to get permission from God to do everything and anything he does. Satan is a servant of the Lord, whether he wants to be or not. You and I should never fear the devil. We should never worry that he might be strong enough to make us, we've always tried to say, well, the devil made me do it. But the devil can't make you do anything. The devil can't make me do anything. During this time, whatever God is doing in your life, God is aware of what's happening in our lives, in our country, in our world. Don't be fearful. Trust in what he's doing. It's not always pleasant. It's not always something to cheer or to have joy about, to celebrate in our own minds. But even James says, be grateful and thankful every time we undergo temptation, because when we're tried, he says, we'll come forth as gold. We'll come forth with blessings. We can't be winners without a battle. We can't be winners without a game to be won. We can't be winners. We can't be successful unless there's a travail. We can't have children unless there's labor and pain. We cannot produce the gold unless there's heat. We can't become the pot or the vessel that God wants us to be without going into the kiln. We can't go to heaven without the cross. Can't go to heaven without the cross. We can't have Easter without the cross. The cross is part of the story of God, and it's a part of the story of God in your life and mine too. Well, God bless you all, and please reach out to me by phone or by Facebook or social media. Thanks again to our men for being here today and helping. So much gratitude, so many blessings to be found in a time that seems to be fraught with so many excuses to be afraid or fearful or discouraged. Let's be otherwise. Let's pass the test. God bless you all. You have a pleasant Lord's Day.